We there? We have 0 viewers right now. All right, I'm going to ask them in the group if they can see us. Maybe I'll just play it myself.
You taking off? Love you. Were you, what,
Oh yeah, it's live, guys. It's going.
you're going
All right. All right. Well, welcome everybody to our movie night discussion of On the Waterfront. So this is a new thing we're trying with a couple hosts. We do a video chat, which will make it a little more interactive, and then it'll be like a really cool thing to watch. Everyone in the chat room, we're going to be listening to what you have to say too. I'm watching the chat, and when you guys comment, I'll bring it into the discussion as well. First, let's introduce our hosts. If everyone wants to introduce yourselves, let's start with Fonzie.
Oh, hi. My name is Fonz. I'm an actor from San Francisco. I've taken Dustin's class a couple of times, and I feel like every time I watch it, I want to get more. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Been acting for about 10 years, and it's been a constant ebb and flow as far as acting goes, because it's a very unsure career. Very bipolar in a sense. But I believe in if you have there's a will, there's a way, and definitely in following your dreams. So yeah, that's pretty much me.
Cool. Great to have you. Noe?
Yeah.
Hello, Noel Torres, go by Noe. I'm more of on the writing side than I am in acting, but I'm also majoring in communications, radio, film, and television in school, just trying to tie that all together. And yeah, I think they started the masterclass back in June. So yeah, it's been a little over 6 months.
You've been in the class for a little while then.
Yeah, I think as soon as I saw it was like I think it was the first time that I saw the ad that I'd signed up because I was so impressed. And yeah, and it just feeds into the writing like I told you guys earlier. Acting makes me want to write, writing makes me want to act, and it's just back and forth between the two.
Cool. Awesome. Good to have you too. Okay, Rex.
I'm Rex Steven Sykes, and I've been acting most of my life, and I love it, and I love everything about film and television and media. I'm also a speaker and presenter, and so I interweave those, or an educator, and so I interweave my love for acting with my love for sharing, and I'm thrilled to be a part of the master class.
Cool. Awesome. Well, excited to have you all here for our discussion. You guys all watched the movie, I assume?
Oh
Yes.
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
No, I didn't watch it.
Well, we were watching Jimmy Stewart in the Rabbit movie. What was that?
Harvey, right?
Yeah, isn't that what we were supposed to watch?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the same exact movie. All right, cool. So let's start the discussion. If you go to the discussion topics, we just want to get I just wanted to see overall vibe. What did you think of the film? How did you connect with your favorite parts? Just like a beginning little overview. What did you think? Have you guys seen it before?
No,
I've seen it once before.
Yeah, it was my first time.
And one of the things that really struck me, I kind of felt the same way about it as the first time I'd seen The Godfather. It's like I watched it and I saw just how much it seems so familiar because you see bits of that everywhere in every movie that came after The Godfather. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I felt the same thing when I saw On the Waterfront, partly with Brando's performance and also how similar it is to Rocky, which we'll
right
get into this.
It's like the same thing.
Yeah, it's like Rocky. Without the title shot, it just goes deeper and deeper into the seedy underbelly of his mob connections and all that. And yeah, it was really familiar, I guess.
Yeah.
Rex, had you seen it before?
Yeah, many times, many times, and I was struck by Kazan, and his approach to acting was know everything about living. And he had this whole kind of underbelly of life current that goes on. I think the thing that always impresses me when I see it is that it has the Stella-like beginning from Brando's other movies where he's yelling up to the to the window, and
Oh.
you almost expect that Stella, and it's like, talking to Joey, and
Yeah.
about the pigeon, and he bursts onto the screen. I mean, what it must have been like for people in the '50s when he first launched.
Just to see that scene for the first time, like in the theaters, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And Brando had this, incredible presence, and to see it on a big screen, I watched it today on my computer again, and the other day on the computer, and it's not exactly the same. But
And Fonz, had you seen it before?
No, I was a baby to it, which was I think it was special because everything was so new, and like a classic like that brings like a different caliber of acting back in the day,
Yeah. It's
and it's like
the performances are totally different. It's like,
yeah, yeah,
but
definitely.
so I guess like what I kept when I was watching it, what I kept thinking was like Marlon Brando.
Hmm.
Um, I felt like in a lot of ways I could see so much of his acting because I'd only seen him in The Godfather before this,
oh
and I
wow,
saw like
Yeah,
the connections between the two of them. So when I know I'd seen on the Waterfront I think before, but I don't think I was really paying attention. Like it was on the background or something, so I knew like the general story. But to see him act and like see a focus where he wasn't The Godfather was like really interesting to me.
right.
Yeah.
what I think is fascinating, and I hope you don't mind me, is
Mm.
I love the scene where Joey's off the roof, and he's looking, and he's like going, and Charlie's talking to him, and Brando's just transfixed on what just happened in his head, and it,
Yeah.
and I go, wow, this is a nice piece of acting. But then you fast forward to the I could have been a contender scene, and the very opening of that scene to me always looks like two people in an acting class.
Yeah,
It just doesn't. I mean, they get into it,
it was
but
visceral, very visceral.
it just seems
Yeah.
like a bad improv when it starts. It's a very different way of getting into a scene.
Yeah.
I disagree. I what one thing I really liked about, I mean, yeah, it's different, especially because,
It's a different time of
um,
acting.
yeah, and even just like in the world, people's behavior was acceptable. I mean, if you take everything into consideration, like all the little things that influence people's behavior, from one generation to another. Um, so it might be bad acting. It could just be something like mannerisms that are unfamiliar to us. But what I really liked about that scene is just Brando's look of just, I mean, the thing you expect when someone pulls a gun out on someone else is the fear or panic or something, but you just see Brando's look of just utter disappointment in his brother, and it's just Terry's in Charlie, and you just see like that look that he gives, and it's just like so, like, I guess just classic Brando, like throwing a curveball, and you're expecting one thing, um, and he gives you something else completely. And he takes that, the reaction to seeing the gun, and then I think perfectly weaves it into his disappointment in his brother in general, the way he's taking care of his
You
little
know, his
brother over the
his
years.
inner life was like it was. He has a specific way of communicating his thought process when he's acting. You know what he's going through every step of the way, and you really don't think about it. So it's like even though it was a different era of acting, it still brought a lot of visceral feelings. I connected
Yeah.
with the story, and like even
Mhm.
though it's not at the same level of acting today, I think it was a different time back then. Like men walked women home. Men actually
Yeah.
worked to be in a relationship. They
Mhm.
worked to be in love with the woman, and now like times are different. So like I have an appreciation because I think those are the fundamentals to acting is watching the classics because you know these actors have done it. You know they've learned, they have wisdom. There's things you could pull from them and then make it your own.
Yeah.
So I mean, I really appreciated that visceralness that he brought to film, and like I like that everyone wasn't pretty, that everyone wasn't a good looking. Everyone was a human. Everyone had a distinct look. They all had character, and that's something else I appreciated.
It wasn't as polished.
Exactly, exactly.
Back in the if you look historically at acting, at one point the camera was very heavy and it didn't move, and so everything was staged in front of the camera. So actors tended to play toward the camera, and then as the camera got lighter and they could encase it, and the sound wasn't an issue, they could begin to move the camera. And then with a steady cam nowadays, you can move it completely. But acting has changed through those years because at one time you very much played to camera, And Brando was literally one of the first actors who had the guts or the balls to turn his back on camera
Yeah.
and to say, I don't have to play this way, and it's your job to capture me. And you can see that with what he does, even though it's still within that framework of the 50s, and it's Kazan, where they're positioned like in the car, and it's a poor man's process, and it's very, contained to the two people in the framing.
Yeah.
But his subtleties and his ability to not push it out to camera, but let the camera kind of suck into him. I think is what one of the things that Brando was so very good at. His
Oh yeah.
his process was they had to capture it, and that technically is what changed with film. I think today more so is like actors go ahead and act, and we'll capture you, as opposed to
It's more of the movie magic than the acting
right.
process itself nowadays. Yeah, definitely. Something that I liked was the bird scene where he asked the girl out, and he was in the cage, and like he had all this action where he would play with the birds, and then he would pop an egg out and then give it to the girl. It's like it's all so thought out. His process it's all very meticulous, and like this you can see all his work. He's just so good at what he does, and like they say he kind of is the father that kind of really took control of the method.
Oh yeah.
Krista says in the chat room that she was astounded by the level of vulnerability that Brando embodied, and I think that's like exactly what you guys are saying. That there's even though, and particularly when you think about this film in like the time that it was done, is that like he was able to create this extreme like character, and like you said, his characteristics are so full, and like his choices are so clear that everything did his research, and it really created something that was really vulnerable and open and real in front of that camera. So I think that's a good point by Krista.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, I totally agree. Like everything we say, it all parallels to him, like just being such a well chiseled actor. It's like he's like you could tell. Like I don't know. For me, it's almost you got to be open to life and really pay attention to things that happen to you, and like write things down and you got to take notes. And like when you watch characters, it's almost like developing a character is like putting a puzzle together. You find different things that work for the character, and then you start trimming the fat, and you can tell he chisels his character so defined.
Then you can see like his attention to detail, like in that scene where the detective is asking him about that fight, and just those few seconds where he's miming, like where he's recounting what happened in the ring and where he had him, and you can just like, see in the way that Brandon's doing it. And it's just so. And my cousin's is a boxer, or was a boxer, so I'm really familiar with their movements, their mannerisms, and just in that moment, he just captured it like so perfectly. It's just like really convincing.
I agree with you. One of my favorite moments that I'm not going to be able to recount when it was, and it's disappointing, is somebody's telling him something, yelling at him, and I forget who it was, and he starts going, and just kind of like talking to himself as the scene ends, and he's just kind of like muttering, and I wish, but it was something that somebody would do in real life. That I mean, it's not mic'd sound, it's nothing that's going on, it's just this kind of like. As the scene ends, and I was like, God, that's so cool.
Yeah.
It's one of those. It's really looking to, and this is why I love Masterclass. I mean, it's finding those human moments.
Yeah. It's not systematic. It's organic.
It's organic and then some, I guess, is what I want to say. It's like we have all these little mannerisms that we do in real life when people are talking or when things happen that somehow get dropped out when you're trying to do a performance a lot of times. And Brando is able to keep those in so much, or Hoffman's able to keep so much of that in that are idiosyncratic or characteristic of of people under stress or people when they're emoting. So
because he doesn't show the result of what he's feeling, which is I think what acting is. You're always playing against the result. If you're furious at something, you don't want to show it. You want to play against it. You want to relieve whatever you're feeling. And so like he was really good at that. Like you see, like he'll look off camera, expand the environment and make you believe the place is so big around, around the camera, while he's just talking to this girl, and he's able to, I don't know, like it's just, for me it's like wizardry. Like he's a wizard, like just like storyteller,
Well, because that's what you would do. I mean, if you're out in a park with some girl or guy or something, and you'd look off and something is over there or something, and so there's this life beyond the frame that he was aware of.
Yeah, something that's just so, I think, astounding about Brando is that this is how you know that with him, when he does all these little things, like you hear stories about directors capturing something that, let's say the story where Viggo Mortensen kicks the helmet in I can't remember which of the Lord of the Rings movies, but he actually breaks his toe.
Okay.
And that's and that's I think that's a better move on the director's part and the editor, but it's not really acting. It was just like him like emoting like excruciating pain. But it was something like that. With Brando, you could tell that it would just be him acting. Like you could pull that off without it having to be real. Because otherwise, I think it's kind of like documentary. You're capturing what's happening, but Brando would be able to emulate that every time without having to, because if reading up on Brando and Stella Adler and all that, they really had a disdain for method acting or the term method acting, and that sort of thing where you rely on memory. And that's something I really admired about them, is that they really put an emphasis on knowing how to recreate that emotion without having to feel that emotion in the moment.
And not kill yourself every time emotionally, There's,
It is.
Go ahead, Rick.
No, I didn't want to cut you off.
Okay.
Shelley Winters once said, because Brando in the early 70s was on like a show similar after he had refused to accept the Academy Award, and the host kept saying, "I got to ask you about acting," and Brando would go, "I want to talk about acting. I want to talk about what's going on with the Native Americans, but I'll lose my job if I don't talk about acting." And so he finally said, "Look, acting is like sharpening pencils. Anyone can do it. So now I've talked about acting." And Shelley Winters later said, "I think why Brando has such disdain for acting is because the process that most of us went through in those days was so incredibly painful. It was all focused on angst. It was focused on hurt. It was focused on injury. And you spent so many hours wallowing in your crap."
Yeah.
And the good news is you don't have to do that. In other words, if you spend most of your time feeling crummy, you're probably not gonna like it that much. And yet the ability to relive without having to relive, I think, is what Brando was trying to escape into.
Yeah.
To create without having to feel that pain anymore.
I had an experience where in rehearsal we had a. I'm sorry, am I getting feedback?
Feedback as well.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of feedback.
I think it's coming from Rex.
Me, really?
Yeah, because the only reason I can tell is the green going up in your screen.
Oh, you probably have the volume.
Me? Well, let me see. Oh, it could be. Let me see here. So if I turn my volume down.
Yeah, we won't get the double echo.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Is it better?
You know what we can do, Rex? Mute yourself.
I can.
So if you go over the video at the top, if you hover over, there's a mute microphone at the top. So just mute it.
So let me turn it up so I can hear you, and then I'll mute. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah.
Cool.
That'll work. All right, go ahead. Sorry, Fonz.
No, it's cocool. Technical difficulties, right?
Yeah.
So I was in a play called Clybourne Park, and there was a few actors that were Meisner that studied the Meisner technique, which is a lot from like feeling the emotion, type of acting. And I'd see them dwindle down during rehearsal. They would get tired because they're always playing the emotion live every time they run the moment in rehearsal. And I'm like, well, it's more about the action to to help you get get through the process easier, and not really like drain your energy reserves always feeling angry or in love or tired, or you're feeling all these emotions and your body's actually being receptive to what you're feeling. So you're sending stress signals to your body because you're feeling something every time, And so
Yeah.
like I think if you mix systems, or you pull from say Stanislavski or Meisner, or any type of Uta from Dustin, you pull all these things that work for you and make you a balanced actor. And I think that's what gets us
Yes.
through the work,
Mhm.
I mean, I think that's kind of what Dustin says in the class. I know we're getting a little off topic of the movie, but in the class, he repeats it over and over that there are no rules to acting, and I
Yeah.
think that what you're saying is like the rule is do what works best for you. Essentially, like that's like essentially the only rule. It's like yeah, there's a ton of different things that people say works and like they do and that like works for them or that works for that person or whatever. But like it's you got to find the method or the like process that's good for you
Oh
personally,
yeah,
and then when you do
definitely.
that, you'll be able to create these characters like Brando did in this film because he found something that works for him.
Well, that's also why now. Are you getting feedback now that I'm talking
No, you're
again?
good.
No, you're good.
It's also why you need a good director, because when you think about it, if everybody, if let's say the five of us, are there five of us, four of us, are in a scene and we all have different processes and different, somebody's good on the first take and somebody's good on the 10th take, it requires a director knowing how to use blend all these different styles of actors to work together so that they all work together maximally instead of exhausting each other and exhausting the production, because because there is no real rule for how we each process something. I wanted to go back to the film a little bit, if that's okay, about the glove, if that's right, because I watched the glove scene before I watched Dustin talk about it, and I watched it. I was riveted on it. I'd forgotten all about that, and I was watching it, and then I was thinking, what a great steam sealer this guy is. He's picked it up and he's using it, and you're riveted to the whole glove thing, and and he's doing his thing, and wondering if Eva Marie Saint is pissed at all because he's like taking her thunder and distracting her. Because that could happen. But and it totally worked because he was committed to it, and he put the glove on, and then Dustin, God, what I loved was the level of emotion that he showed when he described the tears in his eyes when he described this him going through the process and about and then tying it to, well, maybe it was him exploring the feminine side and everything. But I was just like, holy crap.
He's so open.
We're watching Brando. I mean, we're watching Hoffman tear up over this scene. I'm like going, wow, what passion and what commitment and what a level of analysis. So
Oh yeah,
I
for
think,
sure.
for sure.
but I still to this moment don't know whether it was just a steam sealing move on Brando's part or whether it was something that I mean he utilized it no matter what.
Mm-hmm. I think Rex, can you mute yourself again? All right, I was gonna say I feel like that scene in particular, and that was something that it looks like Felix brought that up in the chat. I'm sorry, no. That it was Nina brought it up in the chat. Was that it was like a really great scene when the gloves fell down, and Brando did an amazing job. But and the way that Dustin describes it, it was a totally improv thing, and based on what we know of Brando and his process, it seems like not only was it improv, but it was what he felt was natural for himself in that moment.
Yeah.
Which is why I feel like maybe it wasn't a scene stealing move, because it felt very much in character with who he'd been playing throughout the entire film.
Oh, I don't disagree with that, and I also think the fact that he's sensitive enough in the moment, because a lot of people would pick up the glove and hand it back, but he picked up the glove and was like pulling things off of it and kind of cleaning it up, and then it extended into him putting it on, so it was all very natural. At the same time, I guess what I'm getting at is it rivets the attention on his action above and beyond what she's doing. You can miss what she's saying if you get totally sucked into the glove part. And in that case, it serves to be a scene stealing thing, but because you're acting while somebody else is talking, you're doing something that's drawing the attention.
Yeah.
But I suspect Brando is a very generous actor. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Yeah, go ahead and mute. In the chat room, I want to talk about something Krista talks about. She says that she's a sucker for films that focus on labor issues and themes, and she talks about how throughout the entire film, that tension, the conflict between the character is really high, and it also parallels the real life struggles that happens between workers and bosses. What did you guys think of, I guess, the overall general story of or theme of the film, which was the tension between the mob, the dock workers, and the role that they played in, I guess, the economy and like their relationship with like the union and whatnot. What do you guys think of all that? Just taking it back to the movie.
I like that it was real. It wasn't so conventional. It was more about the boxing. It was more about the life beyond the ring.
Hmm.
And it showed him like go through all the emotions. He fell in love. He's in cahoots with the mob. Things are going bad all over the map, and he's like you just see him all along his arc as a character as he overcomes obstacles and gets into more bad stuff. And I really like the scene with Father Barry when he's holding ceremony and he's asking people to give up some information on how the guy got killed. And it was like I really liked it because the father, he kind of like warmed up the movie for me in that moment, because it all started to pick up after that. Like he
Yeah.
really like drove the scene, and then things just started to pop out more to me.
I think my favorite scene was the scene where Brando is telling the girl, I can't remember her name, Edie. He was telling Edie that he was telling like what happened essentially, and it's like all that noise in the background that's like covering it up, and you just
Yeah.
basically see their faces. And
Yeah, that was a good scene.
that
Good
was,
scene.
I mean, that was so
Oh,
cool, and it was
yeah,
it
yeah,
just
that
felt
was
very
great.
powerful because it's like you can say so much with words, you can tell a story with words, but when you have someone's like like just like real pure emotion on their face, that to
Hmm.
me is like that's solid acting.
Yeah.
Definitely, I agree.
Going back to the what do you call it? Uh, what we were talking about with what was it?
The labor in the union.
Yeah, the labor and all that. To me, it goes back to things like just like when something starts off with good intentions. Like I, I had to read Young Goodman Brown for a class, and it's like the 57th time I've had to read that story. But yeah, it kind of reminds me. Have you all read the story?
Mm-mm.
No, I
It's
haven't.
it's a story by Nathaniel Hawthorne about this young Puritan dude who goes out into the forest to just kind of vague on what his intent is, but he goes basically, I guess, he knows that there's a devil-like figure in there that he must face if he wants to face temptation and come back from it to prove his faith to himself, to
Mm.
tempt his own faith, and it's sort of like sympathy for the devil, in that the man resembles Brown, the main character, and he's got this very familiar tone about him. And he tells him, "Well, you know me very well. I'm the one that helped your grandfather burn those Indians,
Yeah.
and whipped this lady for whatever." And just the same thing like from the song "Sympathy for the Devil." It's like I was there when they shouted, "Who killed the Kennedys?" When after all it was you and me, stuff like that. And how it kind of just reminds me of how organizations start off with the best intent, and then when they grow to a certain size, it gets corrupted. In this case, like the labor unions, is trying to make sure people get steady work, and then it turns into
Oh, they all fight. They all fight for the
yeah.
coins.
Right. Yeah.
Hmm. So like after a while, it starts to corrupt the system, and then something else has to grow from that, to protect the people all over again, which will eventually, as history shows us, will grow to be corrupted after a while.
Right.
Right.
I think it's interesting. This is a cinematic portrayal of the mob and crime going on in the 50s. Very different than how we would portray it today, most likely if it were shot. And yet, Kazan brings to the film this kind of gritty underbelly. I think it's exceptionally a well cast movie. Everybody has like Carl Malden was, I thought, really good in not being too priestly. He played a real person being a priest, and he didn't get sucked into the role of being too pious. And he was a flawed priest without being without too many visual flaws. But everybody from Joey's dad to all of the gangsters and everything, they Kazan, I think, did a really nice job of capturing the dispute, the arguments that people had, and the reality of that kind of dock life worker situation. And without it being kind of like a nefarious underbelly, you like shoot. What's the character name? Friendly. You like Friendly. I mean, he's friendly, and yet he's not friendly at all. I mean, he's a crook. He's a criminal, and at the same time, he's this union boss. So I mean, he there are people who could be really nasty people that you like, and that's also something I think that when it comes to acting, you got to remember that if you're playing a really bad guy, you can still be likable.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you guys notice how
Fun?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
No, we
Okay,
can,
sorry.
yeah.
I was gonna say, did you guys notice how physical this movie was as far as like the stage combat? Like they were really slapping each
Yeah.
other.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
when I was watching, I was like, man, I was thinking, are they really hitting each other? They must be, because it looked like, and I was like, I don't know enough to say like that acting had, at that point, they developed like this like combat fighting we get today. Like today,
Yeah,
it's like choreographed dances essentially, right? When you watch like Star
exactly.
Wars or whatever. But like that was like it looked more real. It looked like that was like how
Because they
people
were really
actually
getting
fought.
slapped. They're like,
Yeah, it was dirty and just visceral.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. To
And I
quote
think like
Marvel.
there's like that old school way of handling, problems or beef that
Yeah.
you got with someone. You talk about it, you face each other, and it's not, it's not you're just gonna kill the guy instantly. Like you want to build that conflict, and I think they did really good in that movie with like making it old fashioned.
The
And,
tension.
and yeah, exactly.
It's also very likely that Cassandra said, "Go ahead, no, really slap him."
Yeah,
Slap him up, and let's see what, because I mean that both those were more of the days of the totalitarian directors and the kind of stuff that they would kind of insist on,
Yeah,
but
like
but in that close up where he's the one guy who skims the $50 and he slaps him up, that slap is probably a whole lot more likely than that would go on than in today's world of super punches. So I think that's
yeah,
and sound effects that reverberate through the theater.
Right.
yeah,
definitely.
like there's that one scene in the beginning, near the beginning, where they can tell that Terry's feeling guilt over what happened to Joey, and well, Friendly, like near the end of it, just tells him like basically to get his head on straight and gives him that uh, light slap, just like to get your head in the game. And yeah, it's a lot of mannerisms that you don't see in movies today.
Do you guys think you don't see it in movies today because of there's this expectation now set that everything has to be bigger and better than it was before? And it sounds like all of us agreed that it was more realistic, like the fighting and everything. Even I don't know if they actually got hit or not, but we all felt like it looked like they were getting hit. But
Yeah,
when you watch something like Jason Bourne and he's hopping over planes or like over buildings and he's like snapping necks and it just seems too easy and I mean totally unrealistic. Do you think that that's like because of the pressure of like getting bigger and better, or do you think that we are just like that is in acting, they wanted to make it more believable and they've gone too far? I
I
guess.
think like people's like I think attention spans have evolved. They've become a lot shorter, and so now it's more about the bam, wow, what's bigger, what'll get the money, the people to sit down in the theater and really like watch. I call them popcorn movies because it's like I kind of like them because it's like a theme park ride.
Yeah.
But when you watch classics, it's more about the story, more about the characters. Like you really have to pay attention to every moment as it happens because you'll miss what the story's about. It's not like they were there was action. It wasn't slapstick action everywhere. It was more about the emotion and the roller coaster of that. You know, does
There's
that
also
make sense?
yeah. I think there's also the advances in editing that you see these scenes that go so long by our standards without cutting, and
Yeah,
it's done for the
the
most part
long
in just
shot.
one shot. Yeah, and you see, and I was trying to imagine it like while I was watching the movie, how it would be filmed. The same scene would be filmed nowadays. It's like, oh, uh, Friendly's talking, so close up on his face. And so then the dude, I can't remember his name, but the guy who took the money, they have like a close up of him looking really nervous and shit like that, you know? And they didn't do it like that. They did that with minimal editing. I mean, maybe if today's editing techniques existed back then, they would have cut it that way. But I think that contributes to that feeling of it being real because they had to go through all of that in one take.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
mean,
it was
maybe
all
not
one
one
take.
take, but yeah.
Oh, like Rex, I wanted to support what you said earlier, where you talked about how cameras now elevate the scene. You know, it kind of amplifies the scene, but back then it was more still, and you see the acting, and like I remember you brought that up earlier.
If you go back and you look at, like, say, something from the like 1930 and then 1940 and then 1950, I mean, if you were to track a genre, whether it would be musical or comedy or drama, you notice how the camera is you'll have like three or four people in a scene, like a three or four shot, or a master shot, taking up a large part of your scene, and not so many close-ups. And that was just logistics in terms of how often they could move the camera and get coverage. Now you can cover almost everything, or you have multiple cameras. I wanted to go back too and mention a couple of things about the feel of the movie and the touching and the stuff. And I think part of it was the ethnicity. You always have different ethnic groups touch more than other ethnic groups, and families touch differently than strangers. But today, I do think that we are less likely to touch. We've got greater social distances in many ways as a culture than we did back then. Men used to walk arm in arm or arms around their shoulders of each other without it being a sexual thing or a romantic thing, and there was no stigma to that at the time. Or women would walk arm in arm. I mean, there seemed to be more connectivity or closeness in some ways, and you would see that captured on film. And of course, in those days too, the constraints of lighting often meant people had to be closer in scenes. So because you're literally your nose to nose almost, there's more apt to touch or express than you are if you look at what's the Catholic priest movie. I just watched it the other night with I'm blanking out on all of it. Spotlight. Very well acted movie. I mean, wonderfully acted. Big Short, wonderfully acted movie. But nobody touches each other in that movie. I mean, nobody. I mean, people are understated. They deliver their lines. They're perfectly, but all of their spaces are pretty far apart. Where in Kazan's days, all these people are pretty tight together in scenes and touching each other and grabbing each other by the cheeks and things that you. And I think that's a sign of our times too.
The scene where they're both in the bar, and the scene where they're both in the bar and they have the moment where you actually see them starting to fall in love. Before they start touching each other, it's when she first touches him on the face. Like I love like they express and communicate their emotions through their body language, and they don't even have to say what they're going through. Like when Eddie, she's like, when she says, "Shouldn't everybody care about everybody else?" And Terry calls her a fruitcake. And I thought you see their dynamic going back and forth already. You see, oh, these guys are gonna fall in love, obviously, because it's there. You see the chemistry.
We're in the chat room. Ross, the actor, says he liked the chemistry between Brando and Steigart. It was really cool to see two Oscar winners side by side. And he's talking about, and Noe, you and I talked about this earlier about like the scene where he tells them where Brando has his like I could have been contender monologue.
Yeah.
And what Ross says, and the thing is that he might have emphasized I could have been somebody instead of somebody, the way that Brando's did.
Yeah.
He's talking about like the challenge and that. But no, you said you had read something really interesting about the order of those words.
Yes, that I can't remember where it was. I think it's from hold on, give me 1 second. I'm busy, Mama. I'm busy. Sorry, it's my little sister. I think someone ruined her day again. But it's what was it? Oh yeah. So what I'd read is I think it's in Brando's Smile, this biography, where they tell him that that in the script it said that it was I could have been somebody, I could have been a contender. No, I could have been somebody. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. And they're breaking that down. So, and Brando also made the decision to put the somebody at the end. So I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody, anybody.
But I'm a bum.
Yeah. So so in that original order, it's like I could have had my foot in the door. I could have maybe advanced a little further. I could have had a shot to be, the champion. But in this new one, he's talking about like I could have, been someone of importance. I could have had a shot to be a champion. Then he goes down like I could have been something. I could have had the opportunity to do any of that, and I think it really changes the dynamic just by changing that word just to the end of it there. And then again, like to the bum, it always goes back to instead of nothing. But to go from I could have been a contender to instead of a bum. It has a different feel than I could have been a contender. I could have been anybody at all instead of nothing.
He shows what he thinks about it every day.
Yeah.
And like words are music, I think, rhythm and tempo of how you deliver something really gives a lot to the audience,
And one really interesting thing about the monologue itself is that he never says that he could have been the champion. Like he's always, like the emphasis is always on I could have had a chance. I could have had the choice. And it's never I know I would have been the best. It's always it would have been nice to have been allowed,
Right, he never even got the chance.
Yeah. So that's something great about that monologue, I think. It's like it's when they say something's cliche. It's cliche for a reason, and like that's people like lean on that monologue a lot. That's because it's a great monologue.
There's another thing to writing that someone once said. If you can write, a catchphrase. It's a star maker phrase like "I'll be back" or "I could have been somebody." Or yippee ki motherfucker, whatever. That those particular lines in a script are the kind of things that make people stars because they become iconic. They become a phrase that then lives on long after the thing is done. I wanted to say that when I made this reference about the scene in the car, I felt that the way they open the scene seems really kind of interestingly rough, and it may be, from a relational standpoint, that they're trying not to telegraph, where it's going to go to the contender and to the somebody part. I think that's such an incredible scene, but I always, whenever I watch that opening part of it, it always seems so, I don't know, uncomfortable to me. It always they're saying niceties, but it doesn't seem real to me. Did anybody else have that feel, or do they just, because I mentioned it earlier, and I think Noe said, well, I disagree with you, but and fine to disagree. I just was wondering if from the start of when they're in the car together, the way it moves, if anyone noticed. You know what I mean? Without the words being the thing, the gravity of the situation changing physically for him.
Like a kind of jumped.
I think that's how I would describe it. I mean, it was kind of like, hey, how you doing? What's it? And it seemed like that's what I said. It was kind of a bad improv, and then all of a sudden, You know, once they start getting into it, suddenly it's just kind of this movement through it where you go, something important is happening here.
Yeah, I did notice it got hot and cold for me in some points where the scenes wouldn't warm up until they actually were in the bar scene together and she touched him. That's when things started to go, fluctuate as far as like the arcs of the movie. And then it would get cold in some areas, and then some areas it was a little warmer. But for me, I was knowing that that was stylistically how things were shot back in the day. I kind of just got used to it and paid more attention to what was going on. But I did notice that it was something that I did pick up.
Yeah. I think that at first, maybe like the first time I watched it, which this is probably also around the same time that when I saw it on the masterclass, back in June or July, that's when I went and saw the movie, and I did notice, some of that. I guess I felt similarly, like to how Rex feels about it, but just really digging into it, just analyzing the shit out of it. I started kind of seeing it, or I don't. Maybe it's my tendency to kind of make everything make sense for me, but I just saw like, well, why does it seem wooden? And to me, like, it would seem a certain way because there's tension. They're both on opposite sides of this conflict, and that's why it doesn't really seem genuine, because it's not, like, to the characters themselves.
You're saying that you don't think the emotions behind it was genuine to the characters?
No, I'm saying that whatever didn't seem genuine, like, to the characters, that actually served the scene well,
Oh, okay.
because because they're in a state of deception, and
Right, because they're not being genuine. The characters aren't being genuine to one another. You're saying.
at the moment.
Yeah.
So
I see what you're saying.
that's my take on it.
Ross agreed with you, Rex. He said that he got what you were saying too. It seems like that a couple people felt the same way. All right, so we got like 10 minutes left. So I wanted to talk about, I guess, Brando's impact. We talked about a little bit at the start about how he created this character, but like what he did carried on to other people. And we know that Dustin was very inspired, and we talked about how he gets really emotional, I think, during lesson 12 when he talks about the glove scene. How do you guys see Brando's impact in this film when you were watching it? Did you see how his impact would have impacted future actors, or like maybe your performances?
I think if I jump in, I never know what my muting is doing. Brando has a physicality that comes through. It's the nonverbals that are going on, the presence that he lives from, that make the words incidental in some ways, unless it's thought out, like as was being articulated a little while ago about the changing of the order of the words. One of my favorite lessons was that Dustin talked about was when Brando would talk to like the second AC or the slate person, and have a conversation so that once the take would start, he would already be conversing naturally as opposed to saying action and coming in on as an actor. He'd already have the conversation going. But his body, it was the way he moved his body. We all lead non-verbally more than we lead verbally. Think our words are afterthoughts to what's ever going on inside us, and Brando exemplified that for actors generations to come, and you can see it in the work of people like Keaton and some of the other actors today, that the amount of physical stuff that goes on before they even utter a word. And I think you can go right back to Brando and Dean and some of those people from that time, and Brando, of course, being the king, was the one to kind of lead that. Or you go Monty Cliff too, but Brando certainly had that huge impact, I think, on the rest of us, to whoever's following.
Mm-hmm.
He definitely does a lot of processing and digesting during the scenes. It's like something I was taught was whenever you're in a situation, you're always discovering something processing it and then recovering. And it's like how we process things as humans. We have to digest what we go through and then make a decision about how to react to it. And he's just so pro at doing that. And I guess he kind of set the modern template for the actor, showing how far you can take it. Because when I see actors do something, I'm like, that's something I look forward to excelling in. That's something to look up to. And he's been doing it, and he understands the human so well
to process the rest of the cognitive experience.
Yeah, he's so cerebral, and he's even during interviews, he'll tell the guy that's interviewing him exactly every thought he's having, because he understands humans so well.
I recommend everyone watch Brando's. What is it? Listen to Me, Marlon. It's a recent documentary. I think sometime late last year it was released, and
oh yeah, it looks really good.
It's a different kind of documentary because there's no interviews with anyone. It's
about him, the man.
Trippy. Yeah, it just goes back and forth. There's no narration. It's all Brando. Clips of him from interviews, and they did this real cool thing where they had imaged a bunch of his expressions into a computer, and then they took that and they took a bunch of his tapes and they made it so that digitized face of Brando would be speaking, acting out his recordings and all that, and it's really cool. But back to this Brando's influence. I went back and when I noticed the connection between On the Waterfront and Rocky, I looked it up and I saw an old review where this critic was slamming Rocky for being a ripoff of On the Waterfront, and one of the things that I actually like about, because it did kind of change my view of Rocky, but all the cues that Rocky Balboa takes from Terry Malloy, I really enjoy his. I'm assuming that everyone's seen Rocky. That scene where Mickey first comes to try to get in on Rocky's title shot, saying, "I can train you, I can get you ready for the fight." And Rocky's like, "Well, where were you all these years that you always said I was just some bum? So what now? Why do you want to come around now that I have a shot?" That where he goes into where Mickey actually leaves, and then Rocky starts to express himself. It's like, your prime. You come here talking about your prime. What about my prime? At least you had a prime. And to me, that's sort of his I could have been a contender moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that Stallone could have did actually take some of his cues from Brando in that scene, because it was really intense.
That's really cool, because I think right now Stallone's having kind of a moment, right?
Yeah.
He's being nominated for Oscars, won the Golden Globe, I believe, right? And he's like, in a lot of ways, I think I've always seen Stallone as someone who's not serious about the craft of acting as more so as other ones. He always seemed like he worked his ass off to get Rocky made, and he's done a lot, but he's done a lot of action films, and that's been his bread and butter for so long, that he doesn't seem like someone who would have maybe studied these previous actors the way that you would think Dustin Hoffman would. Yeah. So when you talk about him seeing, it's clear that he's been studying and doing this stuff forever, and you don't always notice it unless you're paying attention. Which I think speaks to what you guys were saying about how Brando's influence acting over the years, and that people have seen it's about the embodiment. It's not just what things you say; it's about the things that you do and the movements of your hands. Felix in the chat room says he makes it work by using his confidence, which is, we're speaking again how he just said, "Well, no, you're going to have to capture me. I don't have to play to the camera. You have to capture me." He was confident that what he was doing was worth capturing.
Which is a question I have for Kevin Spacey.
Yeah, I was going to... Well, am I cutting somebody off?
No, you're good.
Well, I was going to say, one of the luxuries that Brando had was he kind of burst on the screen as a star. And when you're the star and you're working with a star director, there's a certain power that goes on. And so, he could do what he wanted in camera. So many other actors get a scene or a day or a couple of scenes, and it's the same thing with auditions. You know, you've gotta own the room, and you got to own your time, and you got to own your space without being a prick to anyone, and or without being difficult on the set, but have the same kind of confidence that a Brando would have, even if you're only doing one scene, because you're contributing to the overall project, and you should bring, your best game, and make sure you're part of a team, and you're not, over staying your welcome, I guess, or disrupting the flow. But you've got to be somebody who, when you're in front of the camera, it has that kind of, I mean, regardless of what character you play, but has a presence that has, you bring your best game to it, no matter whether you have one line, or you have a not. It used to be a, it was a silent bit, was still considered an acting thing. Now I think they call it a featured extra role. But you could be an actor and not have any lines. You're just the guy who somebody ran by and you went, kind of thing. But you got to commit to that in the same way that Brando would have committed to it had he been doing lesser roles.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. All right, so guys, we are coming to an end. Is there any final thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, sure. I guess this is more for like the actor or the person, following their dreams. It's about perseverance and like hard work, and I get inspiration from watching these classics. I get inspiration from just like talking to random people in the masterclass community, and we're all trying to make something out of ourselves. And like Dustin says that, he's like, you want to keep swinging and keep that candle burning, because you're gonna miss, you're gonna fail, and that's the whole point. Once you fail, and then you know what you adjust, what you fix, and then you get up and you go at it again, and you keep doing it. And you see yourself transform, and you start to fly, because you've let go of your fears and you've embraced fear. And like Dustin talks about a lot about the soul and the spirit, we have to give our characters as much spirit as we have as people. And like it's just all around. His class helped me bounce back and like program my cells to do my training, what I trained in. And so like I'm really appreciative of the community, and for Brad for hosting the class, and yeah, for you guys, Rex, Noel, thank you guys. It was good to meet you guys. And yeah, I hope we can stay connected and help propel each other. Thank you.
It's good, yeah. All good things. One thing that I want to mention is in just reading, I try to tie all art, see what everything has in common, And one thing I see from great writing is that every word is deliberate, and everything's there for a reason, and you can definitely see that in Brando's acting. Every mannerism, every cough. He's just every little thing he does. It's his character. It's not him breaking character. Stuff like that. And yeah, and it's something I think everyone should look at. Especially in his acting, or in anyone you feel is genuine, is this great actor, like say Daniel Day-Lewis. I mean, I think a single movement is unaccounted for in his performances. So, yeah, and just as students, I think we should really dig in there, and so we can see what works honestly and what doesn't.
Cool.
I'll say, learn from everything. Learn from the history of acting and from the people who came before you, and aim yourself into the future and make your dreams come true. I am so grateful to Brad and the founders of Masterclass, and to Dustin. This has been a fabulous experience. I enjoy every minute of it, and to be able to talk to you guys, and to hang out like this and to learn from others is a fabulous, welcome, wonderful thing. So thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining. For everyone at home, thank you for watching. Looking forward to our next movie night. I'm sure it'll be great. Thanks, guys.
Peace.